Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks so much for joining us today for a really important program we're calling America's Report Card, how the Biden administration is doing a little over a year into its term. A war in Europe, the ongoing impact of COVID, supply chain disruptions, skyrocketing inflation, worker shortages, and political battles continue to pose challenges for the White House. There is some good news, too, and we'll get to that as well. But ahead of the State of the Union address on March 1st, we're taking stock of the administration's response to domestic and foreign policy priorities in a midterm year. We've got a strong lineup of speakers, and we're going to be hearing from this afternoon. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag TheHillSOTU. That's The Hill SOTU. We're broadcasting live, and we'll be taking your questions throughout the program. As with any live stream, if it goes wonky on you, don't throw the computer out the window. Just refresh the page. They tell me that'll fix the problem, and I hope it does. My first guest has had a front row seat during the Biden presidential campaign and at the White House this past year. His actual job is to have direct discussions with Americans and act as the liaison between the Biden-Harris administration and the public. Cedric Richmond is the director of White House Office of Public Engagement, and he's been a senior advisor to President Biden. Of course, we all know him as a long-term member of Congress from Louisiana, which, as I understand it, Louisiana's got a pretty good chunk of folks in the White House. So, Cedric Richmond, great to be with you. Look, we're doing this on purpose. I try to take this moment when we're around the time of the State of the Union address to sort of look deeply at what the nation's challenges are, what progress has been made. I just love to hear, as you look forward, both, we've got big issues. Your Supreme Court nominee just announced, and we've got crazy stuff happening in Ukraine with Russia's invasion. But tell us what your priorities are for the State of the Union address as the president speaks to us next week.
I think what the president will do, first of all, thanks for having me. And two, I think what the president will do is lay out his vision for the next year, but also talk about the challenges that we met during the first year. And look, every president will face the same thing. They will make a number of promises and have an agenda from the campaign trail, which they will try to keep those promises. And then they'll meet the challenges as they come. And look, with this administration, we've had a number of challenges that we had to meet, starting on day one with COVID, moving on to Colonial Pipeline, to Afghanistan, to all of those things. And we are meeting challenges, even if you look at where we are now in the president's incredible leadership with Russian Ukraine. So our goal is to continue to do those things, but also look at those things that are affecting families. And right now we know rising costs is something that many families are facing, and we are specifically looking and trying to address that every day.
When I look at inflation, and for anyone who basically tries to disaggregate why inflation is driving prices up now, some of it is the semiconductor shortage. Some of it is that after COVID, there's huge demand for everything. And sometimes a president is looked at as someone saying, what's the quick fix? When actually they don't have many of the tools to fix that. How do you address that kind of problem where a White House is not, particularly in the United States, we're not a command economy, we're a market economy?
Well, I think part of what you said is a good point, and it's the relationship between supply and demand. And if you go back, 12 years ago, when we came out the Great Recession, we had cars everywhere on car lots, but no one could afford to buy them. Now we're in a situation where people actually have the funds and the desire to buy cars, but we don't have enough cars available because of the chip shortage, which is why we are pushing through Congress the Competes Act and the USICA bill, which would create more chips. If you look at what Intel has done in terms of announcing multiple $20 billion investments in the United States to build semiconductors and chips, that's in a direct response to what we're doing to increase the supply. What we don't want to do is decrease people's ability to afford goods and services. We need to make sure that we're increasing the other side, which is goods and services. So you see what we're doing at the ports, where they're working 24 hours, and now there are more goods going through the ports of America than ever before. So we are pushing to ease the supply chain issues, the bottlenecks, at the same time create more products. And I think that that is the way to do it. And if you look at the forecast still predict inflation to ease substantially by the end of 2022. But I think there's other parts of the economy we have to look at, which is we've created more jobs in the first year than any other president has done in 1 year in the history of the United States. Our economic growth is faster than it's been in the last 40 years. It's faster than China. It's faster than everyone. So those things are all the good side, but the growing pains of that is that we have a real inflation problem. We're looking at it. And we're also looking at the corporations that have so much market power that they can simply just raise profits and to some extent pandemic profiteering and just raising goods for more profits.
I've been watching, Cedric, your comments in the press the last few weeks about the search for the president's next nominee to the Supreme Court. And I saw you saying, we're getting close, we're getting there, we're going through them. Now we're there, and you likely have a nominee. And I'd just be interested in what tell us about her. Tell us why the president has confidence in her.
Well, thanks for the question. The president today announced that he is picking Ketanji Brown Jackson to be his nominee for the Supreme Court. She is very qualified. She, in fact, has been confirmed by the Senate 3 times on a bipartisan vote each time. Once for the United States Sentencing Commission, which I think was a unanimous vote. Once for the D.C. District Court, and once for the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, all of which she received Republican votes. But she's also a brilliant legal scholar. She clerked for Justice Breyer. She studied under him, and she's that smart, pragmatic judge who we believe will represent America well. She'll be someone who all of America can look up to, and it's filling a void that's been missing from the court for a long time. I mean, her credentials are impeccable. So we're excited to get the confirmation process going and to see her confirmed as the first African-American woman on the Supreme Court.
So I know she is going to be the president's nominee, but there was an interesting feature of this discussion where Senator Lindsey Graham and even Congressman Jim Clyburn jumped in supporting another black female candidate very robustly, very strongly. That's not your nominee. Are you going to have to do some bridge building there? Or bridge fixing, I should say.
Let's be clear. I cannot speak for Senator Graham, but I do think that I know Jim Clyburn, who's one of my best friends and mentors, pretty well. What the congressman was stressing is that we have a person with real life experiences and who, because he believes, and his book is called Blessed Experiences, because he thinks people are shaped by their life experience, and he's so right. So part of what Ketanji Brown's life experience, her parents were HBCU graduates. She went to public schools. Her parents taught public schools. Her dad went to night school to get his law degree and then became a lawyer and actually represented the school board. So she has those real life experiences and those challenges. When she went to her guidance counselor and said that she wanted to go to Harvard, her guidance counselor told her that maybe she needs to set her sights our expectations a little bit lower. But she went anyway. And she has an incredible story and she has an incredible track record. So I think that that's the point of the congressman's, what his public positions have been. He loves Judge Childs. She is very qualified. She's been nominated already to the second highest court in the land, which is the D.C. Circuit Court. We look forward to confirming her for that. So I think that this is consistent with what the congressman was pointing out, although he had a preferred candidate, but he also said that that was not the only candidate.
You know, one of the critiques, and I'll even say some friendly critiques of President Biden and his team, is that President Biden was Scranton Joe, that he was trying to reach out not only to those on the left, but basically a bigger swath of America, kind of, bridge all of that. And a perspective is that, as defined by some parts of the Build Back Better legislation, that the progressive wing of the party became the defining edge of the Biden administration. And there's worry that a lot of the president's poll numbers have slipped as he hasn't seemed to be in that pragmatic deal-making center. I know you may have a different view. I'd love to hear it. Do you sense that in this speech that he's going to give and laying out the priorities, he's going to try to swing back to deal with the Kristen Sinemas, the Joe Manchins, other pragmatists that are, you know, perhaps more in the center than many other senators in the party right now?
Well, I just strongly disagree with the premise. Let's go back. The American Rescue Plan we passed with only Democratic votes because Republicans in the Congress would not come along. But the bill was supported by a majority of Republicans in this country. So that was a bipartisan bill. It was necessary so that we could buy vaccines, buy tests, get masks out to people, reopen schools. Only 50% of schools were open when we came in. Now 95+% of schools are open. Those were bipartisan things. And then if you push on to the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which was bipartisan, that bill was doing things that Republicans and Democrats have desired for decades, and that is fixing our crumbling infrastructure. But did we do it with equity in mind? Absolutely. That's why we're removing lead pipes. That's why we're expanding broadband and all of those other things. So we stand by our record. And if you look at Build Back Better, the provisions in there, child tax credit, reducing child poverty by 50% in 1 year should not be considered progressive. It shouldn't be considered Democratic or Republican. You know what it should be considered? The right thing to do. And that's why I'm with this president, because he's guided by a moral compass, and he's watched working families get the short end of the stick in this country for too long. So leveling the playing field, evening out the tax code, and importantly, reducing the financial pressures on families is also would help with the inflationary squeeze that too many families are facing. So that would be reducing childcare costs, reducing healthcare costs. All of those costs take a big housing cost. All of those take a big chunk, big bite out of families' income at the end of the month. So no, I think the president will take time to highlight those things that he has done, and the fact that he is guided by protecting and trying to help working families get a fair shake and get ahead.
Cedric, is there a pathway for the elements, the big elements of Build Back Better through regular order, which I know Senator Manchin is insisting on? Is there a pathway, or because of reconciliation, do you absolutely have to have a reconciliation process around the biggest features of Build Back? I mean, I guess the other way is whether you call it Build Back Better or not, do you have to have the reconciliation channel to pass President Biden's agenda?
Well, I'll tell you what we need. We need willing partners to pass the legislation. This legislation is important. It's, part of what we see is obstruction just for the sake of obstruction. Obstruction just for the sake of getting a leg up in the next election. And what we're focused on is really families. And so I say this all the time, and I'm not flippant when I say it, but politicians worry about the next election. Statesmen worry about the next generation. And we wish that we can find some statesmen and stateswomen on the opposite side so that we could deal with child poverty. We could deal with education. We could deal with inflation. We can deal with all those things that Build Back Better would address. But what I'm afraid of, and I've seen too much of, is this notion that we're going to make Biden a one-term president by making sure the country suffers under his watch. That's not American, and that's not lifting and pushing families forward. So we are open. This president has entertained and brought down more people from the opposite side than probably any president in modern history, because he wants to be bipartisan and he's looking for willing partners. So the question is, if they're against everything that we're for, then what are they for? Tell us what you would do to tackle inflation, because you won't even confirm our Fed nominees whose job it is to assist with inflationary pressures. So, that's a long way to say, what do they stand for? Where are they, and will they meet us halfway? And the proof is they have yet to do that.
Another thing that I'm sure the president is going to address is Ukraine, the crisis in Europe, the solvency and strength of our relations with NATO allies and others. Ron Klain has said, of course, it'll be part of the speech. You know, there's not a domestic issue I can think of that doesn't have some element of an international component. How do you think the president is going to weave together the question of how America comes back together as a nation, both domestically and in dealing with international engagement? Because we see divides where, you know, on the Republican side, we have President Trump and some other senators, you know, calling Vladimir Putin savvy and super smart. How's the president going to respond to that in the State of the Union?
Well, I think the goal, period, is to make sure that America understands that we have a real interest in making sure that democracy is not attacked around the world or here at home, considering January 6th and other assaults on voting rights. But I think the president has shown great leadership in rallying the world and the NATO community around Ukraine and the issue of Russia's aggression. And I think that is important, that we continue to show leadership on the world stage. I think the sanctions are severe, the sanctions are real, and I think that Russia as a whole will pay dearly for the ambition and aggression of Mr. Putin. So I think that the president will, again, continue to lay out to the American people why it's important and what we're doing. And he's done that, I believe, in 2 speeches so far, or 2 addresses to the American people, and he'll touch on it again.
Look, I was critical in a recent piece I wrote in a friendly way of Senator Schumer in the sense that he had brought, somewhat miraculously, the voting rights bill to the floor of the Senate, and it was gone in half a day. You know, I sort of said, hey, you got it on the floor of the Senate. Why not leave it there for months? Why not leave it there as the business of the Senate for a very long time? Let Republicans, you know, either be constructive and join on board, or to be, you know, flamboyantly opposed, kind of, you know, to continue to make voting rights, which also is another placeholder, I think, for racial divide in this country and a lot of other questions on inequality and access. Do you think, so I guess I have 2 parts just to finish this up. Do you think it was a mistake not to leave the voting rights bill, which was so important to our democracy, on the floor of the Senate for a long time and just keep it there? And how are we approaching very toxic issues around race, inequality, geographic divides? I know it's a big question and we don't have a lot of time, but I just feel like it's incumbent of us to ask that question of how we begin to improve and bring the country back together, as opposed to be satisfied with the toxicity we have.
Well, I'll touch the voting first. I think Senator Schumer, in his wisdom, wanted to make sure people were on the record of where they stood in this moment of time in history in terms of protecting voting rights or watching them erode. The Freedom to Vote Act had been out there in the Senate for a long time. The John Lewis Voting Rights and Advancement Act had been out there, and Senator Manchin had been working with others to see if he could get bipartisan support for voting rights bills. And you can't tie down the Senate, because we're still putting judges on the bench that will do justice and love mercy and follow the law and do all of those things. So we couldn't bog it down, but we're not going to give up on it. We're going to keep fighting for voting rights, and we're going to keep working. I think you have a group of senators right now working on voting rights legislations and election reform. But on your bigger point of how do we bring this country together, I think that this president has been very clear everywhere he speaks that America, the idea of America, is not a zero-sum game. And unfortunately, I watched presidents and governors before him push this notion that in order for you to get ahead, somebody has to fall behind, and that if someone else gets a job, you can't get that job. And that is just not true. We don't have to push someone down so that we can lift ourselves up in this country. So just because we are uplifting and helping minority communities tackle systemic racism and discrimination that they've faced since the beginning of time, it doesn't mean that we're holding non-minorities back. Everybody, when everyone does well, everyone does well. And it's not like those who are already doing well are going to suffer because we lift people up. So we're serious about racial equity. That's why the cabinet is so diverse. And that's why you have so many different backgrounds. You have someone like me who went to public schools, HBCU for college, Tulane Law School, sitting in the West Wing of the White House as an advisor to the president because he values diversity, and it doesn't mean that other people can't be here. So we are trying to bring this country together by actually talking about it and reminding people that we will all do better when we lift everyone up. And that is rebuild the middle class from the bottom up and the middle out. And I am, proud that we're actually attempting to do that.
Let me squeeze one last one in because you're good friends with Mitch Landrieu, and Mitch Landrieu is as I understand, the infrastructure czar. When are we going to begin to really feel those dollars begin to pump into major infrastructure projects? We saw, the collapse of this bridge up in Pittsburgh, but as you look at it, you and Mayor Landrieu are going to be with the president out there reminding people how important it is to invest in. We don't spend enough time on this topic, in my view, but just any thoughts on that?
No, that money is flowing. I think that Mitch gave an update just a couple of days ago on how many hundreds of millions of dollars have already started to flow to real projects. And look, one of the things that we believe in this White House is that this was not a stimulus package. This is not just going out looking for shovel-ready projects. This is really looking for shovel-worthy projects because we don't get a chance to invest in our infrastructure that often. And because it's historic, we want to make sure we're going to get the biggest returns on our investment that we're making into America's infrastructure, that we're improving Americans' day-to-day life, roads, bridges, congestion, even the safety aspect of it also. So Mitch is doing an incredible job. He's getting it out. And I believe that, you'll see and people will feel that money in their communities.
Well, Cedric Richmond, Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement and Senior Advisor to President Biden, we very much are grateful for your candor and spending this time with us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, and enjoy your weekend.